The sun had barely risen over the city, its rays struggling to penetrate the dense urban sprawl. I stood by the large window in my office, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hand. The view was breathtaking. Skyscrapers stretching towards the heavens, cars weaving through the labyrinth of streets below. It was a scene I had grown accustomed to over the past 5 years, yet today, it felt strangely empty. My thoughts wandered to the village where I had grown up, a stark contrast to the concrete jungle surrounding me now. The village was a place of simplicity and tranquility, where time seemed to move at a slower pace. I had not set foot there in 5 years, not since my career had taken off and swallowed my life whole. The demands of being a promising lawyer in the city had left little room for anything else. My mother, Margaret, was a patient woman, but I knew my absence weighed heavily on her. Her occasional calls were filled with love and understanding, yet I could sense the loneliness in her voice. It was time to make amends. I decided then and there that I would visit her. My vacation was coming up, and I could spare a week to reconnect with my roots. As I prepared for the trip, I couldn't help but think about Mary. She was my first love, the one I had left behind when I moved to the city. We had shared a passionate romance in our youth, but life had taken us on different paths. I hadn't seen or heard from her since. Memories of our time together were vivid in my mind, our secret meetings by the river, the way she laughed, and the warmth of her smile. The thought of her still tugged at my heartstrings. "Dominic, are you okay?" my colleague Sarah asked, snapping me out of my reverie. She had entered my office, concern etched on her face. "Yeah, just thinking," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'm heading back to my village for a week." "That's great. You need a break. The city can be overwhelming," she said, her tone supportive. "Yeah, it's been too long since I saw my mother, and there are some old memories I need to revisit," I added, my thoughts drifting back to Mary. Sarah nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Sometimes, going back is the only way to move forward. I hope you find what you're looking for." "Thanks, Sarah. I think I will," I said, feeling a sense of determination. Packing for the trip was a mix of excitement and anxiety. I wondered how much had changed in the village, how much I had changed. The drive was long, but the further I got from the city, the more relaxed I felt. The landscape transformed from steel and glass to rolling hills and open fields. It was a journey back in time, to a place where life was simpler. When I finally arrived at the village, a wave of nostalgia hit me. The familiar sights and sounds brought back a flood of memories. I drove past the old school, the church, and the small market square. Everything seemed smaller, yet unchanged. I pulled up to my mother's house, a quaint cottage with a well-tended garden. Margaret was waiting for me at the door, her face lighting up with joy as she saw me. "Dominic! Oh, my dear boy, you've come home," she exclaimed, pulling me into a tight embrace. "Hi, Mom," I said, hugging her back. "I've missed you." "I've missed you too, son. Come in, come in. Let me take a good look at you," she said, stepping back to survey me. "You've grown so much. The city life suits you, but it's taking you away from me." "I'm sorry, Mom. I should have visited more often," I admitted, feeling a pang of guilt. "You're here now, and that's all that matters," she said, her eyes twinkling with unshed tears. "Come inside. I've made your favorite, apple pie." We sat in the cozy kitchen, catching up on each other's lives. The warmth of my mother's love and the familiar surroundings made me feel at home. As we talked, I realized how much I had missed this, how much I had missed her. The city had given me success, but it had also distanced me from what truly mattered. Later that evening, after my mother had gone to bed, I decided to take a walk through the village. The night was cool, and the stars shone brightly overhead. As I walked, I stumbled upon a poster outside the local restaurant. My heart skipped a beat when I saw Mary's face on it. She was performing here in this very village. The years had been kind to her. She looked beautiful, confident. I stood there, staring at the poster, memories flooding back. Seeing her face brought a rush of emotions I hadn't felt in years. Could it really be her? Was this a sign? I knew I had to find out. Tomorrow, I would go to the restaurant and see her again. The thought filled me with a sense of anticipation and hope. As I made my way back to my mother's house, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This trip was about more than just a visit. It was about rediscovering what I had lost and finding a way to move forward. The morning sun rose, casting a warm glow over the village as I stepped out of my mother's house. I could feel the weight of the city lifting off my shoulders with each breath of fresh country air. It was a day for exploring, for reuniting with the past. The village had a timeless quality with its cobblestone streets and rustic charm. The pace here was slower, the people friendlier. As I walked, I took in the sights that had once been so familiar. The bakery where I used to buy fresh bread, the schoolyard where I played as a child, and the old oak tree under which Mary and I used to meet. I found myself drawn towards the local restaurant where Mary's poster had been displayed. The place was lively, filled with the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the rich aroma of home-cooked meals greeting me. The owner, Mr. Thompson, a burly man with a kind smile, greeted me warmly. "Dominic, is that really you?" he exclaimed, clapping me on the back. "Hello, Mr. Thompson. It's been a long time," I replied, smiling. "Too long, my boy. Too long. What brings you back to our little village?" "I'm here to visit my mother. And well, I saw Mary's poster outside. I couldn't believe it was her." Mr. Thompson's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Ah, Mary. She's become quite the singer. Performs here every week. You should come by tonight and see for yourself." "I think I will," I said, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I spent the day wandering through the village, each step taking me further back in time. I visited the old school, now slightly run down but still standing. The sight brought back memories of childhood friendships and youthful dreams. I passed by the church, its bell tower casting a long shadow over the graveyard where my father was buried. I stood by his grave for a while, reflecting on the passage of time and the paths life had taken. As the sun began to set, I made my way back to the restaurant. The place was already buzzing with activity. I found a seat near the stage, my heart pounding with anticipation. When Mary finally stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. She was more beautiful than I remembered, her presence commanding and serene. She began to sing, her voice rich and soulful. Each note seemed to reach out and touch a part of me that I had long forgotten. As she sang, our eyes met, and for a moment it felt as if no time had passed. When her set ended, I approached her, my nerves getting the better of me. "Mary," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned, her eyes widening in surprise. "Dominic, is it really you?" "Yes, it's me," I replied, feeling a rush of emotions. She smiled, a mixture of surprise and joy on her face. "I can't believe it. It's been so long." "It has. You were amazing up there, by the way," I said, trying to steady my voice. "Thank you," she said, her eyes softening. "It's good to see you, Dominic. I've often wondered about you." "I've wondered about you too. Do you have time to talk?" I asked, hoping she would say yes. "Of course. Let's sit," she said, leading me to a quiet corner. We sat down, the initial awkwardness quickly giving way to the ease of old friends reuniting. "So, tell me, what have you been up to all these years?" she asked, genuinely curious. "I became a lawyer in the city. It's been demanding, but fulfilling. What about you? How did you end up here singing?" Mary took a deep breath, her eyes reflecting years of experiences. "After you left, I stayed here, trying to figure out my life. Singing was always a passion, and this village has been supportive. I've built a life here, one performance at a time." "I'm glad to see you found something you love," I said, feeling the pang of guilt for not staying in touch. "Life takes us on different paths, Dominic. But it's funny how those paths can cross again," she said, her smile tinged with a hint of sadness. We talked late into the night, reminiscing about our shared past and catching up on the years we had missed. The connection between us was undeniable, and I realized how much I had missed her. As we walked out of the restaurant, the village bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights, I felt a sense of hope. This journey back in time was more than just a visit. It was a chance to rekindle something that had been lost. "Would you like to take a walk?" I asked, hesitant but hopeful. Mary nodded. I'd like that. We strolled through the village, the night air cool and refreshing. We found ourselves at the old oak tree, our special spot. Standing there under the same tree where we had shared so many moments, I felt the years melt away. Do you ever think about the past, Mary? I asked, my voice soft. Sometimes, she replied, looking up at the tree. But I try not to dwell on it too much. Life moves forward. I know, but being here with you, it feels like no time has passed. Like we could pick up right where we left off, I said, taking her hand in mine. Mary looked at me, her eyes searching mine. Dominic, we've both changed, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it's what makes this moment possible. As we stood there, hand in hand, I felt a sense of possibility. The past was a part of us, but it didn't have to define our future. In that moment, I knew that this journey back in time was just the beginning of something new. The next evening, I arrived at the restaurant early, my heart pounding with anticipation. The place was already filling up with people, locals, and a few visitors, all eager to hear Mary sing. I found a seat near the stage, the same one as the night before, and ordered a drink to steady my nerves. When Mary stepped onto the stage, she looked radiant under the soft glow of the lights. She began her performance with a soulful ballad, her voice carrying a depth of emotion that resonated with everyone in the room. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Each song seemed to speak directly to my heart, rekindling the feelings I had buried for so long. After her set, she made her way to my table, a warm smile on her face. Dominic, I'm so glad you came back tonight, she said, her eyes shining with genuine pleasure. I wouldn't have missed it for the world, I replied, standing up to greet her. You were amazing, Mary. Your voice, it's incredible. Thank you, she said, blushing slightly. Would you like to take a walk? There's a place I want to show you. I'd love to, I said, intrigued. We left the restaurant and walked through the quiet village streets, the night air cool and crisp. Mary led me to a small park, a hidden gem I had almost forgotten about. It was beautifully maintained, with flower beds and benches, and a small pond reflecting the moonlight. This place is special to me, Mary said, taking a seat on a bench by the pond. It's where I come to think, to find peace. I sat beside her, feeling the weight of the years lift off my shoulders. It's beautiful. I can see why you love it here. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. Dominic, what brought you back to the village after all this time? I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. I've been so consumed with my career, with life in the city, that I lost touch with what really matters. Coming back here, seeing my mother, and seeing you, it reminded me of who I used to be, who I still am deep down. Mary nodded, her expression thoughtful. I've thought about you often, you know. Wondered what you were doing, if you were happy. I thought about you too, more than I care to admit, I confessed. I always regretted not keeping in touch, not coming back sooner. Life has a way of pulling us in different directions, she said softly. But we're here now. Maybe that's what matters. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant croaking of frogs. I turned to her, feeling a rush of emotion. Mary, I know it's been a long time, and I know we both changed, but my feelings for you, they never went away. I still love you. She looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise and something else, hope. Dominic, I don't know what to say. I've carried so many feelings, so many questions. I understand, I said, taking her hand in mine. We don't have to rush anything. I just wanted you to know how I feel. She squeezed my hand, her smile warm and reassuring. Thank you, Dominic, for being honest. It means a lot to me. We continued our walk, talking about our lives, our dreams, and the paths that had led us here. It felt like no time had passed, yet everything was different. We were older, perhaps wiser, and the love we shared had matured into something deeper, something more profound. As we approached her house, Mary turned to me, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. Would you like to come in for a cup of tea? It's getting late, but I don't want this evening to end just yet. I'd love to, I said, smiling. Inside, her home was cozy and inviting, filled with personal touches that spoke of her life and passions. We settled in the living room, cups of tea in hand, and continued our conversation. Do you ever regret not leaving the village? I asked, curious about her choices. Mary thought for a moment before answering. Sometimes, but I've built a life here that I'm proud of. I found a way to pursue my passion for music, and this community has been my anchor. What about you? Do you have any regrets? Plenty, I admitted. I regret not staying in touch with you, for one. But I've also realized that success in the city isn't everything. I've missed out on so much by being away. Mary nodded, her expression understanding. It's never too late to make changes, Dominic, to find a balance that works for you. I know, I said, feeling a sense of clarity, and I want to start by being here with you. She smiled, her eyes softening. I'd like that. We spent the rest of the evening talking, sharing stories and memories. As the night wore on, I felt a sense of peace and contentment that I hadn't felt in years. Being with Mary, reconnecting with her, was like finding a missing piece of myself. When it was time to leave, I stood at her doorstep, reluctant to say goodnight. Thank you for tonight, Mary. It was perfect. It was, she agreed, her smile lighting up her face. Good night, Dominic. Good night, Mary, I said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. As I walked back to my mother's house, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Rekindling the past with Mary had shown me that it was possible to move forward, to build a future together. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to see where it would lead. The morning after our evening together, I awoke with a sense of clarity and purpose. The village was bathed in the soft light of dawn, and the air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers. I found my mother in the kitchen, already preparing breakfast. Good morning, Dominic, she greeted me with a warm smile. Did you sleep well? I did, Mom. It's good to be home, I replied, taking a seat at the table. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and pancakes filled the room, bringing back memories of my childhood. I'm glad, she said, setting a plate of pancakes in front of me. You seem different today, more at peace. I feel different, I admitted, taking a bite of the pancakes. Last night, I spent time with Mary. We talked, walked through the village, and it was like reconnecting with a part of myself I had forgotten. My mother's eyes sparkled with interest. Mary? Oh, how is she? She's wonderful, Mom. She's built a life here, and she's still as passionate about music as ever. We talked about the past, and it felt like no time had passed at all. My mother nodded thoughtfully. Time has a way of changing us, but it also has a way of revealing what truly matters. I always thought you and Mary had something special. I think we still do, I said, feeling the surge of emotion. I told her I still have feelings for her, and she seemed open to the idea of us rekindling what we once had. That's wonderful, Dominic. Just remember, love requires patience and understanding. You've both lived separate lives for so long. It will take time to rebuild what was lost. I know, Mom, but I'm willing to try, I said, feeling more determined than ever. After breakfast, I decided to visit Mary again. As I walked through the village, the weight of time felt more pronounced. The familiar sights and sounds brought back a flood of memories, both good and bad. I found myself reflecting on the choices I had made and the path that had led me away from this place. When I arrived at Mary's house, she was outside tending to her garden. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Dominic, what a pleasant surprise. Hi, Mary. I hope I'm not interrupting, I said, walking over to her. Not at all. I was just finishing up, she replied, wiping her hands on a cloth. Would you like to come in for some tea? I'd love to, I said, following her inside. Her home was cozy and filled with personal touches that reflected her love for music and art. We settled in the living room, and she brought out a tray with tea and cookies. Thank you for last night, Mary. It meant a lot to me, I said, taking a sip of tea. It meant a lot to me too, Dominic. I've missed our conversations, our connection, she replied, her eyes reflecting the weight of the years. I've been thinking a lot about us, about the time we lost. And I realized that while we both changed, my feelings for you haven't, I said, feeling a surge of emotion. Mary looked at me, her expression serious. Dominic, I still care for you deeply, but I'm also cautious. We've lived separate lives for so long. It's not just about picking up where we left off. I know, I said, nodding, and I don't expect everything to fall into place overnight. But I want to try, Mary. I want to build something new with you. She sighed, her eyes softening. I want that too. But it will take time and effort. We need to be honest with each other, to communicate and understand that we're not the same people we once were. I'm willing to do whatever it takes, I said, reaching for her hand. I've realized that my life in the city, the success I've achieved, means nothing without you. Mary squeezed my hand, a tear slipping down her cheek. Thank you, Dominic. That means a lot to me. I want to see where this journey takes us, but let's take it one step at a time. I agree, I said, feeling a sense of relief and hope. We spent the rest of the day together, talking about our lives, our dreams, and the future. We walked through the village, visited old haunts, and even ran into a few familiar faces who greeted us with warmth and curiosity. As evening fell, we found ourselves at the riverbank, the same place where we had shared so many moments in our youth. The water flowed gently, reflecting the colors of the setting sun. Do you remember the first time we came here? I asked, looking at Mary. She smiled, her eyes distant with memory. How could I forget? You were so nervous and I was trying to act cool. It was the first time we kissed. I chuckled, the memory as vivid as if it were yesterday. I was terrified you'd laugh at me. And I was terrified you wouldn't kiss me, she admitted, laughing softly. We stood there in silence for a while, the weight of time pressing on us. It was a reminder of the past we had shared and the future we hoped to build. Dominic, Mary said, breaking the silence. I want to believe in us in this second chance. But let's promise each other that we'll take it slow, that we'll be honest and open about our fears and hopes. I promise, Mary, I said, pulling her into a gentle embrace. We'll make this work together. As we walked back to her house, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace and purpose. The weight of time was still there, but it was no longer a burden. It was a reminder of the journey we had taken, the lessons we had learned, and the love that had endured. The morning sun peeked through the curtains, casting a warm glow over my room. I stretched and yawned, feeling the peacefulness of another day in the village. The events of the past few days had left me with a sense of hope and anticipation. Today, I wanted to spend some time with my mother, to talk about everything that had happened with Mary and to seek her advice. I found her in the garden, tending to her flowers. The garden was a riot of colors, a testament to her green thumb and the care she poured into it. She looked up as I approached, her face lighting up with a smile. Good morning, Dominic, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. You're up early. Good morning, Mom. I thought I'd help you in the garden today, I replied, picking up a pair of gloves. That would be lovely, she said, her smile widening. There's always plenty to do. We worked side by side, pulling weeds and watering the plants. The rhythmic tasks and the tranquil surroundings made it easy to talk. Mom, I spent some time with Mary yesterday, I began, trying to find the right words. Oh, she said, not looking up from her work. How did it go? It was amazing. We talked about the past, about our lives. It felt like we were reconnecting on a deep level, I said, feeling a rush of emotion. My mother paused, looking at me with her wise, gentle eyes. That's wonderful to hear, Dominic. I always believed you two had something special. But what's on your mind? You seem a bit troubled. I sighed, pulling off my gloves and sitting on the edge of the flower bed. It's just that, while everything feels right, there's a part of me that's scared. We've both changed so much, and there's so much time we've lost. I want to make things work, but I don't want to rush it or make mistakes. My mother sat beside me, her expression thoughtful. Love is never easy, Dominic. It's a journey filled with ups and downs, with moments of joy and moments of doubt. But it's also about growth and understanding. The fact that you and Mary are willing to reconnect after all these years says a lot about the bond you share. I know. and she said she's open to the idea of us being together again, but she wants to take it slow, to be honest with each other about our fears and hopes. I said, feeling a sense of relief in voicing my concerns. That's very wise of her. Taking it slow, being honest and open, those are the foundations of a strong relationship, my mother said, patting my hand. You've both lived separate lives and experienced different things. It will take time to adjust and to rebuild that trust and connection. I just don't want to mess this up, Mom. I've realized how much she means to me, and I don't want to lose her again. I confessed, my voice filled with emotion. You won't, as long as you're true to yourself and to her. Relationships are about compromise, about understanding each other's needs and being there for one another. You've taken the first step by being honest about your feelings. The rest will follow with time and patience, she said, her eyes filled with love and reassurance. Thank you, Mom. Your words mean a lot to me, I said, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. She smiled, her face glowing with pride. You're a good man, Dominic, and you have a good heart. Trust in that, and trust in the love you and Mary share. As we continued working in the garden, my mind felt clearer and my heart lighter. My mother's wisdom had given me the reassurance I needed. I realized that love was not about perfection, but about the willingness to grow together, to face challenges, and to cherish the moments of joy. Later that afternoon, as we sat down for lunch, my mother shared more stories from her past, tales of love and perseverance, of the struggles and triumphs she had faced with my father. Her stories were a reminder that love was a journey, one that required patience, understanding, and above all, a deep and abiding commitment. After lunch, I decided to visit Mary again. I felt more confident, more grounded. I found her at the local market, chatting with the vendors and selecting fresh produce. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. Dominic, what a pleasant surprise, she said, her eyes sparkling with warmth. I thought I'd join you for a walk, if that's all right, I said, smiling back. I'd like that, she replied, finishing her purchases. As we walked through the village, I shared my conversation with my mother, her words of wisdom and the reassurance she had given me. Your mother is a wise woman, Mary said, her voice thoughtful. And she's right. This is a journey we're on, and it's one we need to take together, with patience and understanding. I know, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes, Mary. I want to build something new with you, something that's strong and lasting, I said, feeling a surge of determination. Mary stopped and turned to face me, her eyes filled with emotion. Dominic, I believe in us. I believe that we can make this work, as long as we're honest with each other and take it one step at a time. I took her hands in mine, feeling a sense of connection that went beyond words. We will, Mary. We'll take it one step at a time. As we continued our walk, hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace and hope. The weight of time was still there, but it no longer felt like a burden. It was a reminder of the journey we were on, a journey that was just beginning, filled with possibilities and the promise of a future built on love and understanding. The days following my conversation with Mary were filled with a sense of renewal and purpose. We spent more time together, exploring the village and rekindling our bond. The more we talked, the more I realized how much I had missed her and how deeply my feelings for her had endured. Yet, there was an unspoken tension between us, an awareness that we stood at a crossroads in our lives. One afternoon, as we walked along the riverbank, Mary turned to me, her face serious. Dominic, there's something we need to talk about. I nodded, sensing the gravity of her tone. What is it, Mary? She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the water. We've been spending a lot of time together, and it's been wonderful. But we can't ignore the fact that you have a life in the city, and I have mine here in the village. How do we reconcile that? Her words hit me with the force of reality. It was true, my career and life in the city were demanding, and I had commitments that couldn't be easily set aside. At the same time, Mary's life and passions were rooted in the village. I've been thinking about that too, I admitted, feeling a knot form in my stomach. I don't want to lose you again, Mary. But I also know that it's not fair to ask you to leave everything you've built here. And it wouldn't be fair to ask you to give up your career, she added, her voice tinged with sadness. We're at a crossroads, Dominic. We need to figure out what we truly want and what we're willing to compromise on. We walked in silence for a while, each lost in our thoughts. The weight of the decision loomed over us, a reminder that love, while powerful, couldn't solve every problem. Maybe we don't have to decide everything right now, I suggested, trying to find a solution. What if we take it step by step, see how things go? We can visit each other more often, find a way to balance our lives. Mary looked at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I want to believe that we can make it work, Dominic. But we need to be realistic. Long-distance relationships are hard, and we need to be honest about our expectations and limitations. I know, I said, feeling a sense of urgency. But I'm willing to try, Mary. I'm willing to put in the effort because you're worth it. She smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. I appreciate that, Dominic, and I'm willing to try too. But we need to communicate openly and be prepared for the challenges. I promise, Mary, I said, taking her hand. We'll face this together, one step at a time. That evening, back at my mother's house, I sat with her in the living room, seeking her advice once again. She listened patiently as I explained the dilemma Mary and I were facing. It's a difficult situation, Dominic, she said thoughtfully. But love is about compromise and finding a way to make things work. You need to consider what you're willing to give up and what you're not. And you need to have an open and honest conversation with Mary about your future. I know, Mom, but it's hard to find a balance. My career is important to me, but so is Mary, I said, feeling torn. Maybe it's not about choosing one over the other, she suggested. Maybe it's about finding a way to integrate both into your life. It might mean making some sacrifices. But if your love for Mary is strong, you'll find a way. The next day, Mary and I decided to have a serious conversation about our future. We met at the old oak tree, our special spot, where so many our memories were rooted. Dominic, I've been thinking a lot about us, Mary began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. I love you, and I want to be with you. But we need to be realistic about our situation. I love you too, Mary, and I want to be with you more than anything, I replied, taking her hands in mine. I've been thinking about what my mother said. Maybe it's not about choosing between the city and the village, but about finding a way to have both in our lives. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine. How do we do that? What if I took on cases that allowed me to work remotely more often? I could spend more time here in the village, and you could visit me in the city when you have breaks from your performances, I suggested, feeling a sense of hope. Mary considered this, her expression thoughtful. That might work, but it will still be challenging. We need to be committed to making it work, and we need to be prepared for the difficulties. I know it won't be easy, but I believe we can do it, I said, squeezing her hands. We've come this far, and I'm not ready to give up on us. She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. Neither am I, Dominic. Let's try to make it work, one step at a time. We embraced, feeling a renewed sense of determination. The crossroads we faced were daunting, but our love and commitment gave us the strength to move forward. In the days that followed, we began to make plans. I spoke with my firm about the possibility of working remotely more frequently, and they were surprisingly supportive. Mary looked into adjusting her performance schedule to allow for more flexibility. It was a delicate balancing act, but we were both determined to make it work. As we stood at the threshold of this new chapter, I felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The path ahead was uncertain, but I knew that with Mary by my side, we could face any challenge that came our way. The crossroads were not an end, but a beginning, a chance to build a future together, filled with love, understanding, and the promise of a life shared.